Snow was falling that night, soft but endless, and the wind howled through the cracks of the small wooden house. Inside, the human man sat alone at his table. His stomach growled because he had not eaten much that day, but in front of him was a small pot of soup, steaming gently. It was all he had left. He had worked 12 hours in the scrapyard, pulling apart broken metal, freezing as the cold cut through his old jacket. Life was hard in the colony, and every meal felt like a fight. He lifted the spoon and took a small sip, feeling the warmth spread inside him. For a moment, he almost believed the world outside was not so cruel. Then came a sound, a faint knock, so soft he thought it was just the wind. But it came again, a hesitant, shaky tap. He frowned, stood up, and walked to the door. When he opened it, the storm pushed Snow into his house, and there on the step were two small figures. They were girls, alien children, thin as sticks, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. Their clothes were torn and soaked. One clutched the other's hand so tightly her knuckles had turned white. They didn't speak at first, just stared at him with trembling lips. "Please," the older one whispered, her voice broken. "Food? Just a little." The man looked at them, at their sunken cheeks, at the way their hands shook. His first thought was survival. He barely had enough for himself. The colony was cruel, and kindness was often repaid with betrayal. His neighbors always said, "Never trust strays, especially alien ones. They bring nothing but trouble." He could shut the door. He could pretend he never saw them. But he didn't. Something in their eyes stopped him. Something desperate, something innocent. He remembered being young once, hungry, helpless, and how no one had helped him. Without a word, he stepped aside. "Come in," he said. The girls hesitated, glancing at each other as if afraid it was a trick. Then, slowly, they stepped into the house. Their small feet left wet marks on the wooden floor. He closed the door against the storm, and for a moment, the world outside vanished. The only sound was their shivering. He guided them to the table and pulled out two chairs. They sat stiffly, their eyes fixed on the pot of soup. He looked at the pot, too. It was not much, just water, a few scraps of vegetables, and one piece of bread he had saved. Enough for one hungry man, maybe not enough for three, but he found himself ladling it into bowls anyway. His own hunger twisted in his belly, but he placed the bowls in front of them. "Eat," he said. The girls didn't move at first, as if they didn't believe him. Then the younger one grabbed the spoon, her hands clumsy, and began to eat so fast the soup spilled down her chin. The older one followed, more careful, but her eyes filled with tears at the first taste. Warmth spread through their bodies as they ate, and they made small sounds of relief, the kind children make when comfort finally reaches them. He watched silently, leaning back in his chair. A part of him felt foolish. Tomorrow he would be hungrier, weaker, maybe even too weak to work. But another part of him felt something he had not felt in years: purpose. The sight of them slowly coming back to life filled him with a strange peace. When the bowls were empty, he tore the last piece of bread into two halves and gave it to them. The younger one held it as if it were treasure, nibbling slowly now that her stomach had stopped screaming. The older one looked at him, her lips trembling, then whispered, "Why?" He blinked at her. "Why what?" "Why? Give us food. Others chased us away. They called us filthy. They threw stones." Her voice broke, and she lowered her gaze. He had no answer that made sense. He just shrugged. "Because you were hungry." The girls exchanged a look. The younger one crawled down from the chair and, still holding her bread, wrapped her thin arms around his arm. He froze, unused to touch, but she clung to him tightly. The older one's eyes shone with tears she did not let fall. That night, he let them sleep on his bed while he took the chair. They curled up together like kittens, wrapped in his old blanket. Their breathing steadied, soft and calm, the sound of safety found at last. He stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if tomorrow would punish him for this choice. But every time he thought of sending them away, he saw again their hollow eyes at his door. In the middle of the night, he heard whispers. The sisters thought he was asleep. "We can't stay," the older one said. "They'll find us. He'll be in danger." "I don't want to leave." The younger one whispered back, "He's kind." A silence followed. Then the older one's voice came again, soft but heavy with promise. "We will never forget him. One day we will come back." The man closed his eyes, pretending not to hear, but the words lodged deep in his heart. He didn't know who they were, or what chased them, or if he would ever see them again. But that moment, the warmth of giving was greater than the warmth of any meal he had eaten alone. When dawn came, the storm had passed. He rose from the chair, his body stiff. The bed was empty. The girls were gone. The blanket folded neatly at the corner, the bowls washed and placed on the table. Only silence remained. For a moment, he wondered if it had all been a dream. But on the table lay a small ribbon, blue and delicate, too fine for beggars to own. It was their gift to him, their proof. He held the ribbon in his hand, staring at it as the morning sun touched the frost on his window. He didn't know that far away, in the halls of power, 2 royal bloodlines had just been saved by his kindness. All he knew was that he had less food than before, more hunger in his belly, but strangely, his heart felt full. The morning sun rose slowly over the colony, painting the sky in shades of pale orange and silver. The man woke in his chair, his neck stiff and his back aching. For a brief moment, he thought of the 2 girls he had taken in last night. He expected to hear their small voices, to see them curled under the blanket. But when he turned, the bed was empty. His heart dropped. He looked around the small room. No children, no sound, only the faint smell of soup still lingering in the air. He stood quickly, searching. The bowls had been washed, placed neatly on the table. The blanket had been folded with care. They were gone. He stepped outside, the cold air biting his skin. The snow was thinner now, and in the white frost he could see small footprints leading away from his house. They were delicate, almost erased by the wind, but they told him enough. The girls had left while he was asleep. He followed the prints for a short distance before they vanished into the busy dirt road of the colony. Merchants were already shouting, selling their wares, and workers trudged to the mines and scrap yards. He stood there, staring into the crowd, hoping for a glimpse of familiar faces. But there was nothing. They were gone, swallowed by the colony's endless movement. When he returned, some of his neighbors had noticed. An older woman carrying water called out to him. "I saw shadows near your house last night. Strays, weren't they?" He nodded slowly, not wanting to lie. She gave a sharp laugh. "Foolish man, you let filth into your home? Strays always bring trouble. You're lucky they didn't rob you or cut your throat." Another neighbor joined in. "Yes, next time they'll bring soldiers or disease. You should learn. Don't waste kindness on them. It only ends badly." He ignored their words, but deep inside, doubt crept in. Maybe they were right. Maybe he had risked everything for nothing. He was poorer now, hungrier than before, and alone once more. Still, when he touched the ribbon the girls had left hidden safely in his pocket, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The days passed, and life went on as it always did. He returned to the scrapyard, pulling apart rusted machines, covered in grease and dust. Each clang of metal reminded him of the silence in his house at night. The girls had been there for less than a day, yet their absence pressed down on him like a weight. He had grown used to loneliness, but now it felt heavier than before. Then came the whispers. In the colony, news traveled fast, usually twisted and exaggerated. Men in the tavern spoke of 2 alien children who had been seen running through the outer districts. A patrol had chased them, but they vanished into the night. Some claimed they were thieves. Others said they were spies. But one story was different. A miner leaned close, speaking low so others would not hear. 10 years ago, the Empire's royal house was attacked. 2 young heirs vanished, never found. Some say they escaped. Some say they were killed. But imagine, if they lived, they would be about that age now. The man froze at those words. The soup, the fear in their eyes, the way the older one spoke carefully, almost like someone trained to hide secrets, it all came back to him. Could it be true? Could the girls he had fed be more than orphans? He tried to shake off the thought. It was impossible. Royals would not wander into his broken home. Royals would not leave behind only a ribbon. But no matter how hard he tried, the idea lodged in his mind. At night, he remembered their voices, the younger one's desperate pleas, and the older one's promise, "We will never forget you." He told himself not to believe it, not to hope. Words from children meant little. Yet when he lay in his cold bed, he could still hear them whispering in the dark, as if their voices had carved themselves into his heart. Winter dragged on. Hunger clawed at him more than ever, but he managed to keep working. The neighbors forgot about the girls quickly. They always did. The colony was too harsh for people to care about anything but survival. Still, every time someone knocked at his door, his heart leapt, thinking maybe, just maybe, they had returned. But it was never them. Weeks turned into months. The ribbon remained hidden in a small wooden box, the only color in his gray, worn-out home. Sometimes he took it out, staring at it in the faint light of his lamp. It was delicate, clearly not something beggars carried. Each time he looked, the question rose again. Who were they really? And why did fate bring them to his door, only to take them away again? One evening, as he sat outside after work, a man beside him spat into the dirt and said, "You know, there's talk of bounty hunters. They say the Empire is still searching for those lost heirs. Anyone hiding them will be executed without question. Dangerous business." The man didn't answer. His fingers touched the ribbon in his pocket. Dangerous business, yes. But if the story was true, then his one small act of kindness had touched a fate much larger than his own. He didn't know if he should feel fear or pride. Years later, the memory still stayed with him. The girls never came back, and life returned to its dull rhythm. Yet sometimes, when he lay awake at night, he thought he saw their eyes again, staring at him from the doorway that snowy night. He wondered if they survived, if they were safe, if they remembered. He did not know that somewhere, far beyond the stars, two sisters were growing into something powerful, something feared, something that would one day shake the galaxy. And he did not know that, hidden within their hearts, was the memory of a single human who gave them soup on the coldest night of their lives. All he knew was that the world was harsh, people were cruel, and he was alone again. But still, when the wind howled through the cracks of his home, he remembered their promise. "We will never forget you, human." And for reasons he could not explain, those words warmed him more than any fire. 10 long years passed. The colony changed. New buildings rose, others crumbled, but the man's life stayed the same. Every morning he woke before the sun, his body stiff and sore from years of heavy work. He put on his patched coat, tied his worn boots, and walked to the scrapyard where broken machines from across the sector were dumped. His job was simple: tear apart the wrecks, pull out the useful metal, and stack it neatly for the traders. Day after day, the sharp edges cut his hands, grease covered his skin, and the cold bit into his bones. His back curved with the weight of endless labor, but still he worked. It was the only way to survive. He had no family, no close friends. Most neighbors barely spoke to him. They saw him as just another tired worker, a man who had nothing and would remain nothing. Some even mocked him quietly, calling him the shadow because he was always there but never noticed. He never argued. He didn't care for their opinions. Yet at night, when the world went quiet, he thought about those two girls. He wondered if they had lived, if they remembered, or if they had long forgotten the human who gave them food on a stormy night. The ribbon they left was still with him. He kept it hidden inside a small wooden box under his bed. Sometimes, after long days when his muscles ached and hunger gnawed at his stomach, he would take it out and hold it. The blue color had not faded, even after years. It was a strange comfort, a reminder that for one brief night, he had been more than just a forgotten worker. He had mattered to someone. Life in the colony was harsh. Prices rose, jobs grew harder, and those with power crushed those without it. Still, he endured. He did not expect joy, only survival. The memory of the sisters was like a ghost he carried with him, silent but present. Then, one winter evening, something strange happened. The wind outside was fierce, carrying dust and snow across the barren streets. The man sat in his home, sipping thin broth, when the ground trembled faintly. At first, he thought it was just mining blasts from the hills, but then the sound grew louder, deeper, like thunder rolling across the sky. The floor shook beneath his feet, and his bowl rattled on the table. He stood and stepped outside. Others in the colony were doing the same, looking up in confusion. Above the rooftops, clouds split apart as a massive shape descended slowly from the sky. The air roared as engines hummed, their power shaking the very earth. People screamed and ran, some falling to their knees in fear. It was not a warship, at least not like any they had seen. The vessel was sleek, shining with silver and gold lines that reflected the faint light. Its hull was smooth, elegant, not rusted or patched like the trader ships that sometimes visited. This was something greater, something rich, something powerful. The man stared in disbelief. He had lived in poverty so long that the sight of such a ship felt unreal, like a dream. The vessel slowed as it approached, and to his horror, it hovered directly above his house. Dust and snow swirled violently around him as neighbors screamed and backed away. Some shouted, "They've come for us!" Others whispered, "Collectors, we are doomed!" The man's heart pounded in his chest. Why here? Why his home? He had nothing of value, no secrets, no power. He was just a worker. Fear gripped him, but he did not run. He stood frozen, staring at the massive shadow covering his house. With a deep, echoing hiss, the ship extended its landing struts and settled onto the ground just meters from his door. The noise faded, leaving a heavy silence broken only by the crackle of cooling engines. The colony was still, the people hiding in their homes or peering from corners with wide eyes. No one dared to move closer. The man could barely breathe. His hands shook as he gripped the wooden frame of his doorway. His mind raced with possibilities. Was it an accident? Were they here for someone else? Or had his past finally caught up with him in some strange way? Then a ramp lowered from the ship's belly, smooth and gleaming. A line of armored soldiers stepped out in perfect formation. Their armor was polished to a mirror shine, and strange symbols glowed faintly across their chest plates. These were not common guards or mercenaries. They moved with precision, discipline, and power. The man felt his legs weaken. Soldiers in armor like that did not come for ordinary people. Around him, whispers rose from hiding places. Who are they? Why are they here? They're heading to his house. His heart thudded painfully. The soldiers marched closer, their boots striking the frozen ground in unison. They did not raise their weapons. Instead, their hands rested calmly on their sides, as if they were not here to fight but to show respect. The man stepped back inside his doorway, unsure if he should close the door and hide or face whatever was coming. The soldiers stopped a few feet from his home. Then, in perfect silence, they parted into two lines, leaving a clear path in the middle. The sound of soft footsteps echoed from the ramp. Someone important was coming. The man's breath caught in his throat as two tall figures emerged from the ship. The colony held its breath. From windows and cracks, people stared as the two figures walked forward, their cloaks flowing behind them, their presence commanding. The man felt a strange chill run through him. Something deep inside told him he knew them. They stopped at the edge of his doorway, the soldiers standing perfectly still behind them. The taller figure raised her head, and the man's eyes widened. Her face was older now, sharper, strong with pride, but her eyes, he knew those eyes. 10 years had passed, but he recognized them at once. The orphans, the sisters. They were no longer thin, starving children. They were regal, powerful, radiant in armor and silks, but they were the same, and they were looking directly at him. The man's knees almost buckled. His breath came in short gasps as memories of that snowy night filled his mind. He had given them soup. He had given them bread, and now, after a decade, they had returned, not as helpless children, but as something far greater. The taller one's lips parted, but before she spoke, the silence of the colony was broken by one whisper that carried through the crowd. "They've come for him." The ground was still shaking from the weight of the ship. The man stood frozen in his doorway as the giant vessel loomed like a mountain of silver above his home. Dust and snow swirled around, carried by the ship's engines, and the air smelled of hot metal and burning fuel. All around, the colony was silent. People hid inside their houses, peeking through cracks in their shutters. A few brave souls stood far away, watching with fear in their eyes. No one dared to step close. The soldiers stood in two perfect lines, their armor shining even in the weak winter sun. They did not move. They did not speak. They were like statues made of steel, their helmets glowing with faint blue light. The man could not understand why they were here, why they were standing in front of his poor house. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. Then the silence broke. From the center of the soldiers, two tall figures stepped forward. Their cloaks moved in the wind, heavy and rich with golden embroidery. Their footsteps were slow, confident, echoing against the frozen ground. The man stared, his mouth dry, his throat tight. He felt as if he knew them, but his mind refused to believe it. They stopped a few feet away from his door. For a moment, no one moved. The taller one lowered her hood. Her face came into the light, and he saw her clearly. She was no longer the thin girl who had once knocked on his door, begging for food. She was a woman now, tall and striking, with eyes that glowed with strength. Her features were sharp, her expression regal. Yet in those eyes he saw something familiar, something that pulled him back to that snowy night 10 years ago. The second figure lowered her hood too. Her face was softer, gentler, but her gaze was just as sharp. Her hair, silver with a faint glow, framed her face like a crown. She looked at him, and the corners of her lips trembled, as if she were fighting back emotion. The man's knees weakened. He gripped the doorframe to steady himself. His mind whispered the truth he didn't want to accept. These were the girls, the orphans he had fed. The crowd whispered from afar. Who are they? What do they want with him? Why does royalty walk to a scrapyard worker's house? The soldiers suddenly moved, but not with violence. They dropped to one knee, lowering their heads in perfect unison. The sight sent chills down the spines of everyone watching. Soldiers of such discipline and power, bowing in the dirt before a poor man's home, was something no one could explain. The taller woman stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but it carried strength that silenced the entire colony. "Human," she said, "do you remember us?" The man opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat tightened, his mind swirled. He could not answer. He only stared, his heart refusing to believe what his eyes were telling him. The younger woman stepped closer, her eyes soft. 10 years ago, on the coldest night of our lives, you gave us food. You gave us warmth when no one else would. You saved us. His hands trembled. He could still see them as children, shivering, holding each other tightly, staring at him with empty eyes. The memory struck him so hard he could barely breathe. The taller woman's voice hardened. You did not know who we were. You did not care. You saw only hunger, and you gave without asking. That night, you saved not just 2 starving orphans, you saved heirs to an empire. The words hit him like thunder. Gasps rose from the hidden crowd. Heirs to an empire? His legs nearly gave out. He shook his head, whispering, No, I was just a poor man with a bowl of soup. The younger one smiled sadly. And that was enough. Enough to keep us alive, enough to carry us to safety, enough for us to remember you every day for 10 years. The taller one lifted her hand. A soldier stepped forward, holding a long black case. He opened it slowly, revealing a crest made of silver and gold, a symbol glowing faintly with ancient power. The crowd recognized it instantly and gasped. It was the crest of their empire, carried only by rulers. The taller woman held it out to him. We are not orphans anymore. We command fleets, we rule systems, we shape the fate of worlds. But we did not come here as rulers. We came here as daughters, daughters of your kindness, and we bow to you. Then, before the eyes of the silent colony, she and her sister lowered themselves, kneeling at his doorstep. Their cloaks touched the dirt, their heads bent in respect. The soldiers followed, bowing deeply, the sound of armor scraping against stone. The man's breath caught. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. A poor worker, forgotten by the world, was now the center of a moment no one could ever forget. The colony watched in silence, unable to understand. To them, he was just a shadow, a nobody. But to these powerful women, he was the man who had once saved their lives. The taller one raised her head, her eyes locking onto his. We have returned, human. We promised we would never forget, and today we keep that promise. The younger one's voice broke softly. Father, may we come inside? The man stumbled back a step, his chest heavy with emotions he could not name. His hands shook as he moved aside. They rose gracefully and entered his poor house, their cloaks brushing the wooden floor. The door closed behind them, leaving the colony stunned in silence. Whispers spread quickly, wild and fearful. Some spoke of blessings, others of curses, but one truth burned into every mind. One human's kindness had drawn royalty from the stars to kneel at his door. Inside the small home, the man sat with the 2 women. For the first time in years, his lonely house felt warm again. And though his heart raced with disbelief, a part of him knew his life would never be the same again. The man sat at the edge of his chair, his rough hands pressed against his knees, unsure what to do. His small wooden house, once silent and empty, now held a weight greater than anything he could imagine. The 2 women sat across from him, their cloaks folded neatly, their posture straight and noble. They filled the room with an energy that made the walls feel smaller, the air heavier. He kept staring at them, trying to connect the memory of two starving girls with the powerful figures sitting before him. The younger one smiled first, her eyes gentle. "You don't believe it, do you?" she asked softly. His throat tightened, and he shook his head. You can't be them. You were just children, orphans. I gave you soup, bread, and then you disappeared. I thought you were gone forever." The taller one leaned forward, her voice strong but calm. "We were not just orphans. We were fugitives. Our family was destroyed, our blood hunted, and soldiers searched for us day and night. If we stayed, you would have been killed for helping us. That's why we left before dawn. But we swore to each other we would return." Her words pierced him. His hand reached instinctively toward the box under his bed, where the ribbon still rested. He had kept it all these years, but hearing the truth made his chest tighten until it hurt. "So it was real," he whispered. "You were more than I guessed." The younger one nodded. "Yes, it was real. Every tear, every bite of bread, every word we whispered that night, we never forgot. While others hunted us, called us prey, one poor human gave us kindness without asking for anything. That memory stayed with us through the darkest nights." The man's eyes watered, though he tried to hide it. He felt unworthy of such praise. He was just a worker, a forgotten shadow of the colony. Yet here they were, royalty, speaking to him as if he had changed their world. The taller woman rose suddenly, and the room seemed smaller with her standing there. She looked down at him, her expression filled with something rare, respect. "You saved heirs to the Empire," she declared. "Now we stand before you, not as rulers, but as daughters returning to the man who kept us alive. The law of our people is clear. A life debt must be repaid. Everything we have, everything we are, we owe to you." He shook his head quickly, his voice trembling. No, I don't need anything. I didn't do it for reward. I just saw two hungry girls." The younger one's lips trembled into a smile, almost breaking into tears. "That is why you deserve it more than anyone. You gave without expecting. You saw us not as fugitives, not as burdens, but simply as children." She reached across the table, her delicate hand brushing his rough fingers. "To us, you were more than a stranger. You were hope." The man could not reply. His chest felt too heavy, his mind too full. The taller one gave a small signal, and outside the soldiers shifted. A moment later, one entered the house carrying a chest. It was laid carefully before him. When opened, it revealed treasures he had never seen in his life. Crystals glowing faintly, coins stamped with the imperial seal, chains of silver and gold that sparkled even in the dim light of his small home. The man recoiled as if burned. "I can't," he whispered. "This is not for me. I'm no lord, no king. I'm just a worker." The taller woman's voice grew firmer. "To us, you are greater than kings. Kings take from their people. You gave when you had nothing. That is true power." The man lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. He remembered all the nights of hunger, the insults from neighbors, the endless labor in the scrapyard. To think that in one act of kindness, he had touched the lives of those who now ruled fleets was beyond anything he could imagine. The younger one's voice softened again. "We are not here to weigh you down with gold. We are here to take you with us. You will not spend your life in this broken colony. You will not die nameless in a scrapyard. You will walk beside us, and the galaxy will know who you are." His heart froze. "Take me?" She nodded, her eyes shining. "Yes, we will not leave you behind a second time. You gave us life, and now we offer you a new one. Come with us. See the stars. Stand by our side." The taller woman stepped closer, her voice low but unshakable. "This is not a request. This is a bond. You are tied to us, forever." The man looked around his tiny home, the cracked walls, the broken table, the chair worn from years of use. It was all he knew, yet it had never truly felt like home. His heart pounded as he looked at the two women, no longer fragile orphans, but rulers who had returned to him. He whispered, almost afraid of his own words. "Why me? Why hold on to a memory so small?" The younger one leaned forward and said softly, "Because when the galaxy abandoned us, you were the only one who didn't, and that kind of memory never dies." The man closed his eyes, the weight of their words pressing against him. He had lived 10 years thinking he was forgotten, thinking his life had no meaning. Now suddenly, everything had changed. He was no longer just a shadow in the scrapyard. He was the man two royal heirs called their savior. When he opened his eyes, the younger one was smiling at him through her tears. and the taller one stood proudly, as if guarding him from the world itself. The silence of the room was broken only by the faint hum of the ship outside, waiting for him. And though he still trembled with disbelief, deep inside, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. The man sat in silence, his mind spinning. The small room felt too full, as if the walls themselves were pressing against him. The two women, once the starving children he had fed, looked at him with eyes filled with expectation and something even heavier: loyalty. He could not understand it, not fully. They were heirs to an empire, rulers of fleets, yet here they sat in his poor house, speaking as if his word carried more weight than all their armies. The taller one spoke first, her tone steady and commanding. "You must come with us. This colony is no place for you. You belong with us now. You gave us life, and we will give you more than survival. We will give you a place of honor." The man shook his head weakly, his voice rough. "I'm no one. I don't belong in palaces or starships. I'm just a worker. I've lived in this colony all my life. I would not know how to walk in your world." The younger one leaned forward, her eyes soft. "Neither did we when you found us. We were lost, broken, afraid. You did not belong in our world, but you saved us anyway. That is why you belong even more than those born into power. You act with heart, not greed." He swallowed hard. Her words struck him like blows. He remembered that snowy night as if it had been yesterday. He remembered their trembling hands, their empty eyes, the way they devoured the soup. He had thought it was nothing, just a moment of pity. But now, in their voices, he heard how much it had meant. The taller one's voice hardened. "Do you think you can refuse us? We command fleets. We rule thousands of lives. And yet we kneel to you. That is how much you matter. If you deny us now, you deny the bond we swore." Her words made his stomach twist. He had never been given such importance, never been told he mattered at all. His life had been filled with silence, hunger, and the endless noise of metal breaking in the scrapyard. Now, suddenly, he was being told he was more than a man. He was a savior. His voice shook. "What if I come with you? What would I be? I am not a soldier, not a leader. I don't know your laws, your customs. What could I possibly give you now?" The younger one reached out, gently touching his rough, scarred hand. "You already gave us everything. You gave us the chance to live. You gave us kindness when the world offered cruelty. You gave us a father when we had none. We do not need you to be more than that. We only need you to be yourself." The word father cut through him like lightning. His breath caught in his throat. He had lived alone for so long, without family, without anyone to call his own. And now, these two powerful women called him what he had never expected to hear again. Father. The taller one stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. Her expression was unshakable, but in her eyes there was something softer, hidden. "We will not force you. But know this, our lives are tied to yours. We are alive because of you. The bond cannot be broken. Wherever you go, our loyalty follows. If you stay here, we will still protect you. If you come with us, you will never be alone again." He looked around the small room, the cracked walls, the broken table, the cold floor. He thought of the long years in the scrapyard, the empty nights, the neighbors who mocked him, the hunger that had followed him like a shadow. He thought of the ribbon he kept hidden under his bed, the only proof he had ever mattered to anyone. Now that ribbon was alive, sitting before him, speaking to him, offering him a place among the stars. His lips trembled. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm strong enough to walk with you." The younger one smiled through tears. "Then lean on us. You were strong for us when we were weak. Now we will be strong for you." Silence filled the room, heavy and deep. The man's heart pounded in his chest. He felt the weight of choice pressing against him. For so long, his life had been simple: work, eat, sleep, survive. Now, suddenly, he was being offered something greater, something terrifying. Outside, the soldiers waited patiently, their armor gleaming. The great ship hummed softly, its engines like a heartbeat in the distance. The entire colony whispered in fear and awe, watching the poor man's house, wondering why the most powerful ship in the sector had landed there. The man finally raised his eyes to the women before him. They were no longer the frightened children he had once sheltered, yet he could still see the shadows of those girls in their faces. He could still see their hunger, their fear, and the warmth that had grown between them in one single night. That memory bound them together stronger than chains. His lips parted to speak, but no words came out. He hesitated, trembling, caught between fear and hope. The younger one reached forward again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, don't say no." Her words struck him harder than all the riches, harder than the bowing soldiers, harder than the weight of the empire. She wasn't commanding him. She wasn't forcing him. She was pleading. And in her voice, he heard not a ruler, but the little girl who had once clutched his arm and eaten soup with tears running down her face. His vision blurred with tears. He lowered his head, struggling to breathe. For the first time in many years, he was not alone. For the first time, someone needed him again. And though he had not spoken yet, deep inside, a decision was forming. His life was no longer his own. It was tied to theirs, as theirs was tied to him. The man stood at the base of the ramp, staring at the ship that towered above him like a mountain of silver and light. His heart beat wildly in his chest, his hands trembling as if they no longer belonged to him. He had lived his whole life in dirt and dust, surrounded by rusted metal and broken dreams, yet now he was about to step into something he could barely imagine. The two women, no longer orphans but rulers, walked beside him. Their steps were steady, graceful, as if the world itself bowed beneath them. When he hesitated, they slowed, waiting for him, their eyes gentle. Behind them, the soldiers stood in formation, their armor gleaming, their heads lowered in respect. The colony watched from the shadows, whispering in disbelief. To them, he had always been a poor worker, just another forgotten man. Now, before their eyes, he was being escorted into a ship fit for kings. The ramp glowed softly under his feet as he climbed. Each step felt heavier than the last. He remembered his small wooden home, the cracked walls, the thin blanket, the lonely nights. He wondered if he would ever see it again, if he would ever hear the familiar creak of his old chair. Yet with each step, he also remembered the night of the storm, the shivering girls at his door, and the way their eyes had looked at him, as if he was their only hope. Inside, the air was warmer, filled with a faint hum that vibrated through the metal walls. The corridors were bright, smooth, lined with strange symbols glowing like living light. Soldiers and attendants filled the halls, but when they saw him, they bowed their heads. Some even dropped to one knee. He felt his face burn with shame. He had done nothing to deserve this. He was just a man who had shared a meal. The younger woman touched his arm softly. "Don't be afraid. They bow not to a king, but to the one who gave us life." Her words made his chest tighten. He wanted to argue, to deny it, but he couldn't. Deep inside, he felt the truth of it. They led him into a vast chamber, filled with banners of silver and gold. At the center stood a throne-like seat, raised high, but neither of the women sat upon it. Instead, they guided him forward, placing him at the heart of the chamber. The soldiers and attendants filled the space, their voices hushed, their eyes fixed on him. The taller woman raised her hand. Silence fell instantly. Her voice rang clear. "This is the man who saved us. When we were hunted, when the galaxy abandoned us, he gave us food, warmth, and hope. Without him, there would be no heirs. Without him, there would be no empire. He is the reason we stand here today." The words echoed through the chamber. The soldiers struck their chests with their fists, a sound like thunder filling the hall. The man staggered back, overwhelmed. His ears rang, his heart felt as if it would burst. He had never been praised in his life, never been seen, never been honored. And now entire fleets bowed to him. The younger one stepped forward, her eyes shining with emotion. "He is not just our savior. He is our father. From this day on, no harm shall touch him. No insult shall reach him. He will walk among us with honor greater than crowns." The chamber erupted in a roar of voices. The soldiers cheered, their voices strong, their armor clashing like drums. The man covered his face with his hands, tears streaming down his cheeks. He had been invisible for so long, forgotten, mocked, treated as nothing. Now, the galaxy knew his name, not as a worker, but as the father of two royal heirs. The taller woman placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Do you see now? You thought your act was small, but even the smallest kindness can change the course of empires." His voice shook when he finally spoke. "I am no hero. I am just a man who could not turn away." The younger one smiled softly. "And that is what makes you greater than heroes." From that day, his life transformed. He no longer rose before dawn to break rusted machines. He no longer ate thin soup alone. Instead, he traveled with them, his name spoken with reverence. In great halls of marble, alien nobles bowed as he entered. In starports filled with traders, captains lowered their heads in respect. To the galaxy, he was no longer nameless. He was the human who had once saved the lives of the Empire's heirs. Yet through it all, he remained humble. He never forgot the cold nights in the colony, the sting of hunger, the loneliness that had carved itself into his bones. And he never forgot the simple act that had started it all. A bowl of soup, a piece of bread, given to two trembling girls. Sometimes, when the stars glittered outside the ship's windows, he sat quietly, the ribbon in his hand. The sisters often joined him, sitting on either side, resting their heads against his shoulders. In those moments, he felt peace. He realized that fate had given him a family he never expected, a bond stronger than blood. And though the galaxy saw him as a man raised to greatness by chance, he knew the truth. It was not chance, it was kindness. One warm meal had changed everything. The ship lifted from the colony, its engines glowing like suns, carrying him away from the life he had always known. Below, whispers spread through the people, stories that would pass from mouth to mouth for years to come. They said a forgotten human had been chosen by royalty. They said soldiers bowed to him. They said a man who once worked in dirt now commanded the respect of empires. But in his heart, he held on to only one truth. He had not been forgotten. The promise whispered by two frightened girls on a snowy night had been kept. And as the stars stretched before him, endless and bright, he realized he was no longer walking alone. He had daughters now, daughters who carried his memory into the heart of the galaxy.